This is Making Waves, a series of podcasts celebrating and commemorating 25 years of Wave Community Bank.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Making Waves, the celebratory and commemoration series of podcasts for 25 years of Wave Community Bank. I'm joined for today's edition by Cath from the illegal money lending team, who's going to give us a little bit of information about what they do. But Cath, to start with, I want to ask the question, what is your definition? What's the team's definition of a loan shark?
So the definition we work off is the legal definition, which is someone who lends money as a business and is not authorised to do so. So if you want to set up a business lending money to people, you've got to go to the Financial Conduct Authority, you've got to fill in loads of paperwork, and they will check to see you are a fit and proper person. Loan sharks are not authorised, they don't go through that process, they don't have those checks done about them, and quite often they're not fit and proper people in any way, shape or form. So that's the kind of legal definition that we work to. But the sort of telltale signs to a loan shark, quite often they don't give paperwork for their loans, they will make up arbitrary interest rates as they go along, and they can resort to sort of threats and violence even to enforce the debt as well. But it's interesting because I think people have a kind of misconception. We always talk to people about Phil Mitchell being your archetypal loan shark, you know, a sort of heavy Cockney guy with a load of baseball bats behind him. Whereas actually last year, 1 in 5 of the people we arrested was female. Right. And we've had loan sharks well into their 70s. So it's not always who you think it is. And that's part of the problem with spotting loan sharks.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because my next question was going to be, what are some of the most common tactics that loan sharks use to kind of exploit vulnerable people? And how can public spot the warning signs for those?
Yeah, it's really tricky. Over half the people we supported last year, when they took the loan out, thought they were borrowing from a friend. It was someone who had befriended them, whether that was online or at the pub or school gates or at the workplace, various different things. And quite often, you know, there's no mention of interest made when the loan's actually taken out. It's sort of, you know, an overheard conversation where someone says, oh, God, your washing machine's gone. What a nightmare. I remember when my kids were little. That was horrific when that happened. Tell you what now, my kids are older. They've flown the nest, so I've got a bit more cash. Why don't I lend you the money? You pay me back when you can. And that's a loan shark, you know, and people would not think that that's what it was at that point. The way that then they kind of progress is, you know, you might think you've paid them back. You might think, you know, hang on a minute, surely by now that loan's cleared off. But when you challenge them, that's when they mention interest. You know, I don't do this for nothing. You know, you owe me money still. You've got to carry on paying me or else. And the or else, it varies. So we do have threats of violence, but I'd say they were rare. Much more often is kind of coercive control. So, you know, sending 150 text messages a day, knocking on your door at 5 a.m. So you've got to explain why that's happening to your partner and your kids, you know, following you to school, threatening to tell your boss at work that you've got your hand in the till because you owe them money. All sorts of different nastinesses that can escalate. We had one recently where the loan shark lent money, £50 to this young girl who was buying school shoes for her very young child. And she paid back £250. And then she sort of challenged it and said, I've paid you about 5 times what I borrowed. I'm done. And the loan shark put on Facebook that she owed him money for drugs and she'd borrowed for school shoes. And her mum saw that, and her Auntie Beryl saw that, and her next door neighbour saw that. And that completely destroyed her. You know, she was distraught by that. So sometimes it's not the kind of threats of violence or intimidation that get people. It's just the way that loan sharks impact their mental health and infiltrate their lives.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be one of my next questions about sort of the impact that this kind of illegal lending has on individuals and families and communities. What do you think can be done to break that cycle?
I think it's really difficult. I often say we're quite like the fire service. So we have the power to arrest loan sharks. We have the power to remove them from communities, take them through the courts, and then also take away their shiny things through proceeds of crime legislation. But actually, that's about putting out the fire. And what we need to do as well is make sure people have got smoke detectors fitted and they've got a way out if a fire starts. And that's about people being aware of what a loan shark is, being a bit cautious about who they borrow money from, making sure they borrow from legitimate places like Wave Community Bank rather than the man down the pub. And also making sure that they've got maybe a little bit of resilience, if possible, in terms of a small savings pot. So if that washing machine does break down, or the car needs new tyres, or the kids wreck their school shoes on the second week of term, as mine always do, that actually you've got a pot of money there that you can kind of look to for those sort of immediate needs.
I know you work closely with credit unions, including Wave Community Bank. How do you think that these partnerships kind of help prevent illegal lending and support people looking for safe and maybe more ethical alternatives?
Absolutely. I think we do lots of work with community banks and credit unions. We think they're fabulous organisations. I think there's sort of two elements for us. One is the savings, promotion of savings, that resilience, like I was saying. So that's a big part of what we do with community banks. But alongside that, I think it is about an affordable, ethical loan. And I like the credit union movement, community bank movement, because it's not computer says no. It's people treating people as people. So if you can't afford the loan you're going for, is there a way you can lend a smaller amount of money and actually help to build up credit scores, build up your reputation with that organisation, so you might be able to borrow more in future? Is what can we do to help you? Looking at income maximisation, looking at other things that go on. And I think, that the traditional community banks where they really know their members and their members know them and they can have honest conversations about money, I think that's an invaluable resource as a society.
Are there any specific challenges that you face in bringing these loan sharks, these horrible people, to justice? And more importantly, how can communities help in terms of reporting them?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for us is people being brave enough to put their head above the parapet, But it's interesting because when we say to people, why didn't you report this sooner? Just for our learning and our sort of internal workings. Quite often it's not fear or even shame or embarrassment that's the reason. It's that they didn't know we existed and they had no idea this was a crime. They didn't know that Brian down the pub didn't have authorization to lend them money. He was actually lending to 50 customers in the pub, charging them all double bubble and threatening them with all sorts when they couldn't pay. They thought it was just them. They thought it was Brian who'd lent to them as a mate and there was nothing they could do about it. So I think it's raising that awareness. It's having those conversations. And, I've been doing this job a long time, about 18 years now, and I've never had anyone say to me, I wish I hadn't reported the loan shark. I've had plenty of people say, I wish I'd reported the loan shark sooner. It takes an average of 3.5 years for people to report loan sharks, and that's a long time to be in someone else's grasp, financially and emotionally. There's a lady I'm working with at the moment. She earns £1,086 a month. She's got young kids. The loan shark's taking £900 of that every month. We've worked out what she borrowed from her female loan shark. She's borrowed just shy of £3,000 in lots and lots of small loans, £100 there, £200 there. And we worked out she's paid back 25,000 and the loan shark says she owes another 16. So that'd take her up to 41,000 on a £3,000 loan, and she cannot afford to pay it. And she's called Kelly. So for the Kellys of the world, we need people to stand up. Now, Kelly came to our attention because her next door neighbour worked out what was going on because this person was hammering on the door in the middle of the night. Next door neighbour, an elder gentleman, he had a bit of savvy. He Googled us and he found us online and he helped Kelly to report that loan shark to us. So I think it's just about raising that awareness, and people feel that like they're alone, like they've been silly somehow taking this loan out, but it's not that. These are pernicious criminals who are greedy and who play on people's vulnerabilities. So they need to be stopped. And I think it is just about making it not a taboo subject and having those conversations.
So, Cath, for someone who is struggling financially, hopefully we've got lots of people listening to these podcasts, and if there is someone that there is struggling financially and maybe considering borrowing from an unlicensed lender, what would you say to them, and where should they go for help?
Yeah, the big thing for us is it's just not worth it. Bear in mind Kelly, because Kelly's not an extreme example of how much she's paid back and the impact it's had on her. Her mental health is rock bottom when she actually came to us. She was considering all sorts of things to try and get out of the situation. So I think it's easy to say it's not worth it, but it just isn't. I think it's about having a conversation with people you owe money to, because we get an awful lot of people who've borrowed from loan sharks because they've had an eviction notice come through or a possession notice, or because bailiffs have turned up because of a debt they haven't dealt with. And actually, if you can have those conversations or get some free regulated debt advice from Citizens Advice or Pay Plan or Step Change, then actually that means that you don't need to borrow that money anymore because you're dealing with your debt effectively, and they can reduce payments and so on and so forth. People tend to panic when debt gets to a certain point and try and borrow their way out of it, and we always advise not to do that. But if you are looking to borrow, and we know, there's trigger times all throughout the year. Summer holidays tends to be a big one, but so is Christmas as well, and school uniform going back in September as well. So if there is a time that is coming up, then talk to your community bank, talk to your credit union, and actually look there instead of looking for the person down the pub or the mate online.
And Cath, if they want to get in touch with you, if that individual wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So we have a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week hotline, which is 0300 555 2222, and that is manned by one of the teams. So we don't use call centres or answer phones or anything like that. We will take information anonymously. We'll take it in confidence. You can tell us you're called Mickey Mouse, and we'll call you Mickey Mouse throughout the call. That's not a problem at all. But it's just about having that conversation about what your options are at that point in time, and then making an informed decision. We don't put pressure on people. It's just about informed decisions as far as we're concerned. We've also got a website, which is stoploansharks.co.uk. That's got live chats Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, if people would rather type than talk. And that there's all sorts of information on the website as well, and links to our YouTube channel, which has got videos of actual victims telling their stories, which are quite impactful to see.
Just give us that phone number one more time, Cath.
Certainly will. It's 0300 555 2222.
Cath, you are insanely busy. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having us, and happy 25th anniversary.
Thank you.
Making Waves is produced by and on behalf of Wave Community Bank. For more details, visit our website on www.wavecb.org.uk.